Chapter 17. Moving past the railings of the stairs, I take shelter behind a bookcase. The second-floor balcony is full of them, against the walls and next to tables. The bright light hurts my eyes. Melted candles cover every surface of what's left of a library. I cannot see the talking figure with the raspy voice. The bookcases are too dense with books. "The blood, you see," continues the raspy voice, "is the essence of power." Whimpering comes from another person in the room. I sense Bronin is about to say something and shake my hand to silence him. The look on his face is confounded. He is bending to see through the books like me. "And with power, you see, one becomes useless." I need a better position. Edging up to the side of the bookcase, I angle my head just enough to see a figure in a black cloak bent over an open book, busily scribbling away with a feather pen. Scars trace its lips. "Useless is unacceptable." There is a pause. "Fortune favors you, my friend. You are not useless." The figure chuckles. I move from one bookcase to another, using the shadows from the towering shelves to hide my body. Crouching at the knees, beams of light fall on my face through the cracks between the books. I position myself for a better look. "And the moral of the story is?" I see who the figure is speaking to. A bearded man, stripped to nothing but a laborer's pants. Tattered cloth hangs from his skin at bloodied parts of his torso. Sitting in a chair with his arms outstretched across the table, the underside of his arms face up, exposing deep lacerations in his taut skin. Eyes closed, his head sways around on his shoulders, bobbing around like a doll. The figure in the cloak stops writing and paces around the tortured man, carrying the pointed object he was writing with. "Power is everything," the figure says, clasping the man by his hair. Exposing his hand from underneath the cloak, the captor holds it up to the prisoner's face. There are black nails, long like daggers, protruding from his fingertips. In an instant they are in the man's arm, filleting his flesh like a specimen in a laboratory. The man, unable to move his head, screams horribly. Tears run down his face, blood drips from his missing teeth. The chains binding him rub raw at the wrist, exposing a portion of bone in his forearm. More blood streams from the ripped scabs. "Please, I beg you," says the tortured man. I can barely hear him. The black cloaked figure brandishes the feather pen and dips it into the freshly made cut. The man screams again, and as the figure moves back to his book and begins writing with fresh blood. I run my finger over the blade of the balaka. Enough of this. I stand to approach, but Bronin gets in my way, stopping me as I did him. "Don't," he whispers. "What if it sees us?" "Sees who?" responds the raspy voice. Bronin closes his eyes. The hairs on my arm tingle. More chuckling follows. "You can come out now. I've entertained long enough." I step out from the shadows, holding the balaka before me like a sword. The bearded man's eyes widen from my sudden appearance. "Lord Wolfgang, please help me." The man can barely talk. "Lord Wolfgang, is it?" asks the cloaked figure. I see within the shadow of his hood a pale face and sunken eyes, slender white hands, long nails. Bronin appears beside me with a flask in his hand. "And a cohort. Seems an introduction is in order since we are all here." The cloaked figure motions to the man in the chair and to some random location behind him. Looking past his shoulders, I cannot comprehend the horror that I see. An iron cage braced on a stand holds thin, naked people stuffed inside like sausages in a butcher's box. No room to move. The flat bars press against their arms and legs. Their skin is pulled taut over ribs. Obviously, they haven't eaten in weeks. A woman, a child, 2 men. Their yellow eyes stare beyond me, lost, forgotten. I am the master librarian Roul, and these obedient servants you see here have graciously volunteered their time, aiding me in my research. Roul smiles. Release them, I say, stepping forward. The people in the cage startle at the sound of my voice. I am master of this castle, not you, says Roul, looking about the walls and shelves. What's left of it? You are not the master. I killed him long ago. Is that so? Before I can react, Roul digs his nails inside the man's arms again, twiddling his fingers. The man screams. Stop, I say, taking another step. You can make it stop, says Roul, twisting his fingers deeper into the meat of the man's muscles. Or make it worse. The man shakes as blood spurts onto the table. I feel useless. Retaliation will cost the man's life. My hand is numb from squeezing the bouaka. My eyes dart about the room. Good, says Roul. Lord Wolfgang possesses reason. This is a rare for a hunter. He smiles and nods his head approvingly. I never finished my story. He gestures with his hand, and the book he was writing in comes soaring to him. Dipping the quill into the man's arm, he begins writing. Now, where were we? Ah, yes. Since we established his power is everything, the king strived to ensure he would never lose it again. My focus is elsewhere. There are tapestries hanging from every wall, curtains from every archway. And since blood is power, and all the girl's blood was used, he didn't simply throw her away. Oh, no. He still had use for her. There is another element in power to consider. To the back of the chamber on either side there are halls leading out, one going up and one down. Tall standing candelabras light the way. Fear, Roul pauses, dipping his pen in blood again. The bearded man cries out. The cage shakes. The little girl inside moves in response. Roul scribbles in his book. Fear is the second prime element. So the king did what he must. Roul's words are distracting, penetrating my thoughts. I try not to listen, to force him out. I focus on other things. I notice the woman in the cage is awake. On a pale moon night, when the orb was full in its glory, he strung her up on the castle wall, split her from the navel to her pretty little parts, and left her for the crows to peck. His subjects knew him, his enemies knew him, God knew him. Roul looks at the ceiling with a smile. There is precious little time. Roul, I shout, have you seen a boy and a man? Roul turns his head to me. Changing the subject, I see. Brash, he says with pointed teeth. Very well. I have seen no boy, only a man. He is with the Cardinal Risi. His lips curl at the edge as he chuckles. The Cardinal Risi, the chosen of Oglesian's closest. They should have perished after the castle fell. I want to ask more questions about them, but suddenly the cage behind Roul begins moaning. All the people inside are awake and alert. I see their arms reaching out, grasping at the air, feet dangling like worms. More moans come. The little girl's lips are trembling. Please help me, the man in the chair says, struggling with every phrase. I hear the fresh blood in his windpipe. Oh, this is too dramatic, says Roul, lashing out with his hand, cutting the man's neck. Blood sprays on the table and book, speckling Roul's face red. No, I shout out over Roul's sinister laugh. Look at you, making me waste perfectly good blood, says Roul, wiping his face and licking his fingers. How will I ever finish my stories now? Red liquid pours from the man's neck like a fountain. With your blood, I suppose, finishes Roul casually. The bouaka leaves my hand. Spinning through the air with such speed, Roul is gone before the blade reaches him. Back! Now, I say to Bronin, as my blade comes whirling into my hand. A blurred image passes back and forth toward me. Instinctively, I raise the bawaka before my face, bracing it with both hands. Roul's teeth lash onto the center. His fangs grind on the leather-wrapped handle, inches away from my face. I see the black of his sunken eyes, blue capillaries spread across his face as his jaw tenses against the cross shape of the bawaka. He grabs both of my arms and lifts me from the ground with ease, tossing me into a bookcase. My body breaks every shelf on the way down, splintering wood and scattering books. My teeth rattle as my head hits the ground. A cascade of leather-bound volumes falls around me as I struggle to upright myself. A burst of fire across the room sets me in motion. The fire is hot and burns away a bookshelf riddled with old parchments and vials. Some of them pop as I approach, crouching, trying to keep below the visible height of the chairs and tables. I splash through what I think is water, then realize it's not water. Red and thick, all of the blood is drained from the dead man in the chair. Head tilts to the side, he gazes at me with a lifeless stare. Where is Bronin? Desperately, I search, scanning the ground, the shelves. The smoke makes my eyes burn. Something passes before me. Bronin! I shout. There is no response. The fire is traveling up the walls along old tapestries, igniting instantly. It seems the entire room is ablaze. It passes by me again and stops before a stone vase spirated from destruction. Roul stands erect with his arms at his sides, nails fanned out like fins. He waits a moment, watching me as if contemplating something. He says nothing. Slowly he begins walking toward me, and then, like a flash of lightning, he comes quickly, moving side to side with precision, his image distorting in the process. Nails swipe at my face. I step back. A thrust to my abdomen. I parry the blow, then cut. His fragile skin opens at the wrist, spraying blood across papers and flames. Without regard, he swipes at me again, this time with both his hands, one at my head, one at my torso. I have no choice but to protect my face as his other hand rakes my chest, shredding the proofing like tree bark. Using his momentum, I grip his black cloak and roll onto my back, thrusting with my leg. Roul flies through a pillar, breaking apart stone and ripping sconces from the wall. Stone comes crumbling down around him, crushing his body. I hear crying in the distance. Rubbing my eyes, it's nearly impossible to see anything with all the smoke. In a brief moment, I see the cage turned on its side over a pile of splintered wood. "Lord Wolfgang?" comes a feeble voice. It's the little girl. Choking through the smoke, I struggle toward her. "Lord Wolfgang," comes another voice, female yet stronger. "How do they know my name? They must be villagers from Roland." Suddenly my head snaps back. Pain shoots through my skull as fingers rip at my hair. "I think not," says Roul, his stinking breath on my face. High above us there is a wooden chandelier covered in fire. "Look at this! Look what you've done!" Roul screams, nearly bursting my eardrum. "All of my work wasted!" His grip tightens. The tips of his nails break the surface of my skin. He's going to crush my skull. "Where the hell are you, Bronin?" Screams come from the cage. Roul jerks my head in its direction. The little girl's eyes are crinkled and closed. The iron bars are burning into her skin like a cattle brand. She screams and doesn't stop. Tears stream down my face. Anger and hatred well up inside me. "Look at all that good stock going to waste," Roul says. I hear the blood rattling in his lungs. "Lucky I have you." There is cold, moist air on my neck, and I know what is coming. My jaw tenses, my eyes flick open. Fire is everywhere, consuming everything. The heat irritates the scars on my face. The cage is consumed in fire. The moaning has stopped. I cannot break free of Roul's death grip. There is a loud groan high above. The walls rumble. The pain in my head suddenly lessens. An opportunity. With upward force, I bring my elbow into Roul's chest, enough to distract him for a moment. Grabbing his hand, I slice it off with the buaka. Its sharp edge cuts through flesh and bone, severing every decayed tendon in the vampire's wrist. I tumble forward, roll on the ground through burning books, and turn to face Roul with determination. He will no longer write with that pen. Eyes wide, Roul screams, "Bastard! My hand! My hand!" But he doesn't scream for long. The groan high above is followed by the snapping of a chain, and the chandelier comes crashing down, burying Roul beneath a tomb of burning splinters. I hear moaning beneath the fiery grave, and relish at his suffering. His cries are nothing to me. I watch the last moments of his existence turn to ash.